broadcast, Alec Newald. I appreciate you coming on the program.
Thanks, Daniel. Look, it's a tremendous privilege to be on. I just to give a chance to connect with your listeners in that. Obviously, you've been around a while and you've had a few guests on your show, so I'll do my best to live up to the reputation you've already established.
Now, you are in New Zealand.
That's right. I sure am in the South Pacific, as they say, probably about 8 hours. 7 or 8 hours away from your time zone, so we're in tomorrow for you guys. It's Sunday afternoon here.
Wow. Well, first, I guess we have to start off with the first question that everybody is thinking in their mind right now. I'm going to channel their thoughts. Do you guys have any coronavirus affecting you down there?
Well, I think there are a few cases, only a handful. Nothing that's altered any programs or any events. As such, we've had no cancellations that I know of, but there are some moves afoot. I know to maybe cancel a few in the near future if it gets any worse. But we're reasonably isolated, fortunately.
Well, that works out. I'll tell you what, man. Is land cheap down there?
Actually, no.
Oh.
I think it's the same. I think it's the same price. I live close to the city centre here, basically, and it's the same old, same old. You have to mortgage your life to buy a property. That's for sure.
Well, Alec, you have an amazing story to tell, and I don't come across these stories like yours too often. A lot of times, it's people talking about somebody else's. They researched and they're on the program to tell me what they researched, the result of their research, their interviews with other people, perhaps, or per se. But you are an example of an actual firsthand adventure, and I don't know if that's an appropriate word to you because it depends on how it turned out, whether it is an adventure or a nightmare. But let's go back. Let's get a little preliminary. Give the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll work our way up into your flight. When that happened, who are you before that? What are you made of? What do you do?
Yeah, I'd just like to correct that. I noticed on your on the blurb you had at the beginning that it was a 3-hour flight. It actually was a 3-hour drive, Daniel.
Oh, drive.
So
okay.
I wasn't flying anywhere,
okay.
Which puts a whole new context into it. Like if you're in an aeroplane and you disappear, the whole of the world would be looking for you, obviously. But
okay.
no, it was only a drive in an automobile. So
sure.
Just so in case your listeners are confused with if we get into that at a later date.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yep. So I always considered myself just very average, Daniel. I've never done anything greatly spectacular in my mind. I've been a businessman though all my life. I mean, I've been self-employed since I was about in my early 20s. So I do have an urge to be a private and self-fulfilled individual. It does put you offside to a certain degree because a lot of people like to follow the crowd, if you know what I mean, and be led into things. I sort of have always felt that I wanted to make my own life and be an individual. And it kind of, with what we're going to talk about in the next hour and a half, is that sort of actually bit me on the bum, if you like, because that I became basically a private individual that was thrown right into the limelight. So it's been tough for me. I'm not really an entrepreneur in the self-promoting side of things, and it's always counted against me, I think, in trying to get this adventure or this life experience out to the public, because I haven't been comfortable talking in front of a camera or on stage, doing a conference, which I've done a couple of, but I've always sort of tried to avoid them. So forgive me, and I hope your listeners forgive me if I'm not polished in this presentation, because it's not the sort of thing I want to be doing for a living. So as long as people understand, I've been forced into actually presenting what had happened to me, whether I like it or not, because people just demand explanations, So I've been slow coming forth, and this is we're talking 30 years of history. and you're talking about a survivor in the first hand. Another 30 years, I don't think I'll be here because I'll be a centurion. So, definitely need to fulfill in the public's mind the details of this event. So that, there's a lot of stuff happened that I regret actually striving to, be more public early on. I think there's a lot happening right now. Even you're talking about the coronavirus and that. That is almost related. I foresaw this coming. In fact, the adventure that I had, the off-planet adventure, I was tested for all sorts of viruses when I was taken off-planet, if you like, because they thought I'd be carrying something similar to what we're just going through now. And the last thing that any other race of people would want is to be basically inundated with a virus that they had no immunity to. So, and the tests I had with them very early on were exactly to prevent what is going around the planet now from being conveyed into their community. So, and it's hard to explain, but that's just the start of it, because we've had, as you know, SARS virus, and that we've had actually. I did a bit of research the other day. For the last 20 years, nearly every 2 years on the dot, we've had a virus released. My own particular take on this is these are a military sort of enhanced natural product. So I don't think they're nature. I think there's a bit of a human enhancement in this natural virus we're seeing out there. So that's, I think, a danger, and don't ask me to explain that. It seems insane that anyone, even the military, would be playing with viruses and bio-warfare, because you think it'd just come back and bite them.
Right.
So, it's insane.
Well, that's true. And then, I mentioned in my ranting points, I don't know if you saw that or ever seen that in this part of the show, because it's not in our, when you go to videos for the guest, it's not in there. It's another place. But there's conspiracies out there. And one of those, of course, is that China is mad because our president equalized the trade playing field with China, and it's actually cost them hundreds of billions of dollars because we tried to make the trade correct. Or more balanced. And so people are saying, well, they released that to get us. They created a virus in Wuhan, sent over. But the fact of the matter is, their people and their economy is devastated. It's nearly wiped out as a result, and they're ordering people back. So each conspiracy theory has its own fallacies, and I don't think anybody should follow a conspiracy theory. It could very well be exactly what it is, just another strain of flu. And right now, it's not got anywhere near the damage and effect of other flus. But so, all right, so you were driving along, and you got I guess, are we ready for that just to start from the driving along place? Or wait a minute, what do you do? What's your history? I didn't get that.
Yeah, well, I've had various businesses over the years, but my mainstay for the last 20 years, I'm a sailmaker by trade. So I'm a professional yachtsman. A sport, I guess you could say a professional sporting person, but sailmaking is my root core in yachts. I mean, sails make the yachts go faster. So naturally, when I was a sailor and a racer, yachtsman, I always wanted to make that boat go faster. So the only thing I could do to help promote that was to learn everything I could about sails. So I took on an apprenticeship, did an apprenticeship in sailmaking, and then started up my own business from that point on. At the same time as being a professional yachts person. So that's my core. But I mean, also I'm very interested in cars. I've raced cars most of my life since a teenager. I love speed. I love that type of adventure. I love the adrenaline rush, and that makes me also a competitive yachtsman. It's the same sort of thing. You're pitting yourself against fellow men basically, and trying to go faster. So my whole life has been based on sporting endeavors, I guess, and that includes business as well.
Okay. All right. So you just had an average sort of life, saddle maker. That's a very interesting thing. And so now being in cars, let's just put it this way then. Something happened to you in a car you were driving. Were you the driver?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But first question I got to ask, Did you hit 88 miles an hour? Is that when it happened?
Most likely. Something like that, anyway. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm so comfortable driving a car. When this actual event happened, it took 10 days out of my life, but it just blanked that out. And when I arrived, after this 3 hour drive, I felt like, how you can drive for some considerable distances and you can't actually remember passing certain points during that drive that you might have done 100 times. You just don't have a conscious memory of actually going past that house or that tree or that signpost that you know is there, but you can't recall it. It was a similar sort of feeling when I got up to Auckland. I was travelling from a place called Rotorua, which is in the centre of the North Island of New Zealand. There's two main islands in where I live, North and South Island, and I was travelling sort of a half the distance of the Northern Island. So it's a 3 hour drive. These are not huge. New Zealand's not huge, only about 1,000 kilometres from one end to the other. And I had no recollection. It was a blank sort of space, but I actually felt like I'd just run a marathon. It was like I'd had an exhausting event happen while I was just driving. So there was something strange that had happened. And as it turned out, on conscious memory being, reconstituted memory, I was actually driving the car not far, only about an hour or half an hour away from leaving my port of call, as it was. And I felt that the car started to vibrate, and I felt like somebody had poured glue or cement over me. I sort of froze in the seat at the steering wheel. I couldn't move my legs or my arms, and then of course the car was still doing a considerable speed, probably not 88 miles an hour, but something approaching that. And I was on a quite a twisty mountain road, so there were rock faces I was driving around and cliff faces dropping down the other side. And I found myself on a little straight stretch of road doing a considerable speed, and I couldn't turn the steering wheel and I couldn't apply the brakes. And as far as I knew at that time, the car just went straight into that rock wall.
Wow.
So everything that happened after that, consciously remembering that I was driving that car and I couldn't avoid an accident approaching. I mean, I had no idea what physically was happening to me at that moment, except that I couldn't control the car. And so I assumed, having possibly crashed that car, that I had died, because there was no other logical, there was nothing else in my head. I wasn't a UFO buff, not a conspiracy theorist at the time. I had no recollection of what happens to people when they get abducted by UFO or extraterrestrial. So anything that happened after that crash, to me, I was dead, and this was an afterlife event. In other words, I was now a ghost.
Wow. What an introduction to this. Let me get a little business out of the way real quick. Those just now joining us in the live chat is Kevin Utterberger, Brian Matus, Meow M's back with us, Nine Live, Southern Boy, Space Cow, Ray B, Can Nuke, Paul Shishis, and Azur all joined us in the live chat. Wow. So you thought you were dead. You felt like you were driving right into the side of a mountain. I was wondering, as these things, as it seemed like something was taking control of your car. It reminded me of the story of Admiral Byrd when he was supposedly flying, was in the South Pole, and something took a hold. Do you know that story about Admiral Byrd? How a tractor beam took hold of his plane, and it sounds like a little bit of that going on. All right, so you thought you were dead, and you couldn't control the car. What happened next?
Yes, well, so I'm trying to give your listeners a sort of a heads up to what my mindset was when that initially happened. So from now on, I'm considering I must be a ghost. So whoever I'm seeing is operating obviously in an afterlife format. I mean, I'm not highly religious in that manner, so I wasn't looking to see God or anyone, but I was just curious as to say, okay, I'm dead, but I still seem to have a conscious recollection of I can see. I couldn't I looked down, I couldn't see any arms or legs. So I obviously didn't have a body, which gave me the impression, okay, I must have died. And even though I didn't know anything much about afterlife, believe me, I've read a lot about afterlife events since that day.
Wow.
And I'm quite researched on it now. But and it does sort of make sense to a certain degree, even though this was, as it turned out, an artificial environment, because I was on some sort of a UFO or a craft or some dimensional holding pattern, whatever, however you want to describe it. And I didn't have a physical body. So I had to teach myself, because I was thinking, well, how do I get out of here, or where am I?
Of course.
Why am I here? And even if and what's going to happen next, or should I need to move? Because I was saying I couldn't stand and float in limbo forever. So then I started to teach myself how to move, and that's when you've got nothing connecting you to the floor or the ground or any no arms and legs. Not as simple as it sounds. And in the end, I started pushing forward with what would have been my head, but in that context was probably my consciousness. And I found if I pushed in any particular direction, I floated or moved in that particular direction. So now I was a mobile ghost.
Wow.
And at that point, then I could see in the distance, because I was in a strange environment. The floor below me looked like it was glowing. It looked like it was made of ice. If you could imagine a glass or an ice floor with some sort of lighting effect below it, a white light. So it was a glow, and it felt cold, even though I didn't have these arms or legs you would think, to feel temperature. I had the feeling that I was actually gliding across ice. And in the far distance, there was a circular, like a neon rotating beam. Like, how a neon light can flash on and off in different areas, and it gives you the impression that it's moving. So in the far distance, and this could have been like half a mile away from my impressions, it was a long distance into the distance, that was some sort of rotating beam of light that was glowing a neon blue. But within that confine, I saw other wispy, glowing sort of entities that I guess you could describe them as ghosts. They didn't have any solid form. They weren't particularly humanoid. They didn't appear to have a head or a body. They were just like an upright column of smoke. But they were glowing a sort of an orangey color, a yellowy orange color. And they were moving around, and having learnt to move myself, I was confused. Do you head towards these obvious, some sort of a being or whatever, and try and find out where you are, or communicate with them, or should I be heading in the opposite direction and running away? I mean, I didn't know I was in a safe environment or what. So all of that confusion, this whole thing might have only taken moments, but it seemed that as your mind goes through, like you're in the middle of an accident, everything seems to slow down into slow motion. So you have a lot of time to think about what might be a 1 second thought. And so in the end, I was still debating whether I should communicate with or move away from these ghost-like entities, when once again I felt a tap on my shoulder from behind. And once again, I have to iterate that I didn't seem to have a body. So how could I feel anything? These are conflicting facts that were going on. So, I mean, I can't explain any of the reasons why you can feel something when you haven't got a solid body. People are just going to have to believe that's the way it was. So anyway, I turned around, and there was this being, or this ghost-like entity, 2 of them actually, I think, standing right behind me. And I got the impression, or I got a mind sort of probe, if you like, that it would be comfortable and desirable to follow them. So, and all I can explain is that I wasn't in fear at the time. I was quite peaceful and restful, almost meditative, I guess. And whoever these beings were, I didn't feel necessarily afraid of them. I was curious to know what they were, and it felt quite natural to follow them. So even though I didn't know it at the time, this may have happened before. I mean, or perhaps we all go through this, when we pass from one life to another. I might be explaining what it's like to be a ghost, even though this was an artificial death, in actual fact, because I was aboard a spacecraft, not heaven or whatever else might be above us or below us, whichever way you want to go. So I was following these beings, and we moved out of that unusual situation into what looked more, if I could describe it, more like Earth technical environment, like machinery. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was moving out of one chamber of this space vehicle into another, which was more human-like, I guess, would be the best way to describe it. So that's when the transition was from a ghost into a body, into a physical body, because they asked me at that point to step into a glass tube, a column, like an event, some sort of machinery. And once again, I didn't feel that it would be fearful to do so, or that I shouldn't, or my instinct was go with it, whatever they wish. This is the only way to discover what this is all about. So I stepped into this glass-like environment, and it built a body, a physical body. I actually was looking down inside this tube, and I could see my rib cage start to form. Quite a freaky sensation. And, within a matter of moments, maybe minutes, I don't know, the door opened, or the tube pulled itself up above me, and I stepped out with a physical body. And it was, looking down, all I could describe it as, it was very, very similar, or the same physical body, or a similar physical body that I would have had in real life back on Earth, that I've got now. But it was blue. It was an amazing color of blue. I could almost describe it as a denim blue. My whole body was that color. But in physicality, I couldn't see my face, of course, but looking down, I saw my hands and my legs and that and the rest of my body, and it looked very, very familiar. Like, you do get to know your body after 40 years. And this was what I was considering my body. So there we're at.
Oh, well, that's interesting. When you said blue, I instantly thought of the movie Avatar.
Actually, you might have seen, I think the favorite color of all aliens these days is blue. There's several of them.
Well, that's interesting too, because I was watching the Netflix Ancient Aliens, and they went through a segment, and their depictions of ancient aliens were blue as well. So something about the color blue. But I tell you what, Alec, we got a number of questions in. Let's go ahead and start with a couple of them here. All right, let's get at the top of the list here. All right, from Australian Ben, how relevant are dimensions in the spiritual realm as compared to the physical realm? Is the spiritual realm impervious to dimensions? Now, you didn't say you were in a spiritual realm. You're indicating you're in some kind of reality. Is that right? Or was it a realm type of thing?
Well, I guess as the story, as my adventure, as this event unfolds, that actually does get described to me. But the best way to help your listener out is that in this instant, it was an artificial construct. But, having researched realities and dimensional realities and the spiritual realms since that day, for the last 30 years, that's been my quest, is to understand this whole event, that I don't feel that there is very little difference between even an artificial dimensional reality and one of a natural construct, because I think all of this is from our consciousness, from our higher selves. We, I think, are part of this universal concept, and we can exit and enter these other realms, these other dimensional realms, with our consciousness when we detach, like an out-of-body event or near-death event. Many people have recorded. Our consciousness seems to be able to leave the body in the non-physical form and go on adventures on its own and return to the physical anytime that a door is open or available to us. It doesn't always occur. Sometimes it occurs by accident, with a near-death experience. But I think when we're more I think when we're more highly developed, or like by accident, we find that our structure is so made that we can leave this physical realm. Our consciousness can travel the universe, and
Okay.
that includes different dimensional realities.
Okay. Looks like the chat, our chat room's having a time. Put Yahweh First says, I saw a bluebird today. Dreamwalker says, nurses wear blue scrubs. And then and also says that the color blue inspires trust. So and then there's also something out there called the Blue Man Group. So we're all blue tonight for you in celebration to have you on the program. All right, let's get to another question. Put Yahweh first. As a matter of fact, what type of beings did you travel with?
Well, there were several. There were two main beings. One was called an elder, an unusual, a small man, I guess you could say. A lot of people said that these are similar to the Greys, but I've got my own, theories on that, and I don't think they quite fit that bill. But anyway, this is the ancient race, and they've created a hybrid race, evidently, that are very human-like, because their main future endeavor is to be able to settle on planet Earth. So they're constructing a hybrid race to come and basically take a ride with us when planet Earth has this dimensional shift, which a lot of people have been talking about for a very long time, which seems to be a very real event. Studying it as I have been for the last 30 years. I didn't know anything about it at the time that this happened to me in 1989, but evidently there is going to be some sort of a shift on this planet, an awakening, if you like. And these entities, these extraterrestrials, had constructed an artificial environment of their own and actually altered their structural makeup in a dimensional type of reality, and they'd got out of phase with the natural environment we live in, and that would cause, you could call that the universal structure of being, whether it's physical human or spiritual human. They had artificially constructed an environment which was decaying, and their only hope, I think, for their future survival was to create a hybrid race which could intermingle with humans on Earth, because their ancient lineage is from this planet, and that they could come back and regraft themselves back into humanity and take this spiritual ride that is being predicted for the human race in the near future. So that was their main goal. And one of the reasons that they were interfacing with me was because I'm living on planet Earth, but my family lineage and structure, going back millions of years, is connected to this ancient alien race. So they evidently lived on planet Earth and other planets in our solar system. I think Mars and another planet that had been destroyed, going back 50 to 100 million or even a greater distance in Earth's past. They'd visited Earth many times. They'd been part of the conglomerate that had structured the human body in the form that we know it today. So they've got a lot of connections with planet Earth, and my ancient family lineage was part of their family lineage, and because they're grafting themselves back in the human race, they knew that I'd be useful to them for all of their endeavors.
Well, Alec, I've been trying to trace back my family lineage because I got a feeling somebody in the back eons ago has got a big chest of gold, and I want to find out where it is because it's mine. But but you lead me to the question then. Okay, you're driving down the road on your merry way. You're not bothering nobody, not thinking nothing. You're not even thinking aliens going to take you. Then all of a sudden this happens to you. Why did they choose you? You think you were targeted?
Yeah, well, that's tying back to that family lineage. I didn't realize it at the time that these two facts were connected, but when I was a child, like 7, 8, 9, 10, I had a lot of reoccurring dreams. And this is long before Jurassic Park movies had ever been made. And I was being transported in these very lucid dreams back into a period of what I believed was Earth, back at least 50 million years, where there were dinosaurs here. And even as a 10-year-old child, I can remember being on board a spacecraft and coming down and landing, and we were doing geological research or looking for rare minerals or whatever you'd like to fancy. Back in those days, the Earth was very primitive and young, and there was a lot of volcanic activity. Because I can vividly remember that we camped out in an area very close to active volcanoes in these childhood lucid dreams, and we'd seen from space or in a landing craft dinosaurs actually in the areas that we were landing, and we were worried that we had to set up a lot of fail-safe traps and that to keep us safe. And these dreams were recurring over year after year after year, and I got to almost believe that was part of my history, even though as a child, after 10, 12, 13, 14 years of age, you get on with your adult life, you forget childhood stuff. I'd also had interactions earlier on than that with small physical beings. Once again, you put them down to childhood imaginations. You dismiss them as you grow up. I mean, I was a 40-year-old businessman while I was driving that car. So childhood events get dropped out of context, I think. But if you bring those back and add them to this event that was happening to me in 1989 when I was 40 years old, it wasn't such an unusual event. And
all right, Alec.
It appears that my childhood life has been connected with them all the way through.
Okay. Did any of your relatives have these sort of abduction experiences?
Not that I know of. But then, like I've been the only one that's spoken out from my family group, and it has been. You're
the only one brave enough to.
It hasn't been a pleasant ride for the last 20 years, I can assure you.
Okay, so have you been called a kook?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I don't even want to go there. I don't read other people's comments to any statement I might have made that's been written down or commented on, or any.
Good. That's good. It can be vicious, Alec. It can be vicious out there, man. I'd stay off social media for sure. Don't read the comments, man.
No. I mean, but I understand people finding it difficult to believe because it's not something that happens to everyone or anyone, and that is the problem. Do you tell anybody about it, or you keep it to yourself? And I think by keeping it to ourselves, it perpetuates the myth that there is no such thing.
Okay, all right. Let's get down. So hopefully, maybe you'd be able to remember some details. How big was the ship you were on?
Massive. I paced out some rooms, and they were like hundreds of yards across, and those were just particular rooms.
Were there other people on board?
Yes, there were. I mean, I actually met fellow humans that wanted that were there from choice, from what I can understand, and did not want to return to Earth. I mean, once again, the family lineage obviously tied in with some of them and with myself. But there were other creatures as well, and some that we were separated from. And the comment was, you don't want to mix with them; they might not like you. So you can take that from what.
Yikes! Ooh, don't get on the bad side. What you're telling me? Did any of those rooms were aliens impregnating women?
Not to my knowledge. No. So
that
wasn't happening.
Do they like Earth women?
It might be the other way around.
Whoa!
Well, I mean, they're going to come here and they want to communally breed into the Earth, the hybrid race coming here to intermix with the humans and become more human. So the natural breeding processes are going to occur. Yeah. So they've got to be prepared for that.
Well, how do you prepare for a rendezvous with your alien dude or whatever, or women or whatever?
Well, you don't. This is the whole thing, Daniel. You don't prepare for that, and I wasn't prepared for any of this either. No. So everything that occurred was just you take it at face value, and one step follows another, and you can't predict. I don't know what's going to happen 4 hours down the road today. Right, who I'm going to meet or what's going to happen.
Right, nobody knows that.
Yeah, everything that happened was taken literally a moment at a time. And I was not totally comfortable. Even as I said before, I wasn't afraid of these beings or these people, But I was in a foreign environment, completely detached from any help from home, you might say,
Hmm.
and I didn't know who was going to come to my rescue if I ever got into difficulty. So, of
Well,
course, there was that feeling in the back of your mind. I better just play this safe and cool because
hmm
if I get angry or I do something unexpected, it could work out really badly
well,
for me. So
maybe since our president created something called the Space Corps, maybe they could have sent a rescue mission up there to get you. But
yeah, yeah. This
how
is
far
1989 though.
how far out in space were you?
I'm not sure when I was first picked up. I mean, reasonably close, I think. But later on, when I was with these other humans, we were sort of almost chatting in a lounge room. There were video displays there which showed our solar system, I believe, and it was pointed out to me that that star, one major star I was looking at, was actually our sun. So
Hmm.
we would have been in the outer perimeter orbits of our solar system, I guess. The sun might have looked like that from Pluto or from even further out. I mean, our sun basically became a star. So
Hmm.
how many million miles you have to
Mm.
be away from that to your guess is as good as mine.
They didn't let you drive the spaceship for a while just for kicks, did they?
No, no, I wasn't quite privy to that. And if you'd seen the way they were driving it, you would understand, that they were connecting up by feel more than anything else. So
Hmm.
they weren't holding levers and pushing columns and
Hmm.
pressing buttons. Put it that
Hmm.
way.
All right. A question for you came in. What was the decision to return to your body after being dead? Was it yours, or were you merely thrust back into your body?
Well, I had this. There was the first body I described that was made for me in that glass tube. That was once again not my true Earth body, or I didn't believe it was. It was once again an artificial construct. They had made an Earth-shaped body, but that was more compatible with the environment I was going to be in because I was moving from one-dimensional reality to another. And evidently, there is the transit zones where you need to be partly fluidic, if I could say, or more ghost-like, not so solid. And so they had constructed a body which was more in keeping with their own,
Hmm.
which looked human because they wanted me to feel comfortable in the body I was wearing. They said it would be rather a culture shock for me to be plonked into some alien body, my
Hmm.
consciousness transferred to perhaps an alien body.
Hmm.
And with all that was going on around me, the last thing they really wanted was to freak me out or make me
Hmm.
feel completely
Well, they
uncomfortable.
want
And
to make
they
you feel
thought,
at home, man. You
yeah,
just, hey, you got some Netflix and popcorn. I'd feel a lot better up here.
yeah,
So when you're
yeah.
looking at the alien species, were they insectoids? Were they tall grays? Were they Nordics? What were they? Were chupacabras?
Well, the humanoids were very strange. We're getting onto that coronavirus. The hybrid woman for a start, and most of the men looked very Asian. They had that look
Wow.
of the Orient about them. It's very difficult to define one Asian from another because there's so many sects, as you know, from Vietnam through to
Whoa.
China. Not all Asians are the same, but they have a basic bodily makeup and facial features which
Hmm.
distinguish them from Caucasian.
Well, I
Um,
got to put it this. I'm going to have to go back and put this disclaimer on that one, man.
Yeah,
Wow.
well, yeah, well, not only that. I mean, we could leap 20 years into the future, but I'll tell you now, their main colonization areas were depicted to me to be China. Mainland China was going to be where they were going to intersect with humanity on a closer
Hmm.
scale
Hmm.
because they were very Asian looking, and they felt they could translate into the Asian community very without almost any detection.
Well, now see,
Um,
there's a good thing right there. I was just thinking, Alec. If you got some of the aliens that have hostile intentions, what we could do is find a bunch of people that do got the coronavirus and say, "Hey, these guys would like to go for a ride with you." Kind of like in Independence Day, you know how they solved that problem.
yeah,
They
yeah,
we got up there
yeah.
and they put a virus in there and killed them all off. So that would be a good way we could get rid of them.
Yeah, I think, but it's the other way around. I think that there's particular groups on this planet that you and your listeners will know. are very au fait on what's happening in the UFO and alien community. I mean, the fact that the mainstream press has a difficulty in believing that UFOs and aliens even exist is so prehistoric these days that they're not even on planet Earth as far as I'm concerned. So if you accept that the higher echelon of who's running this planet are fully aware of the threat to the establishment on planet Earth if alien group arrived here and declared themselves, like on the White House lawn, and basically said, "Hey, we're taking over because you guys are making a mess of this show." You can imagine there'd be a lot of people on this planet that wouldn't like that scenario to happen. So even an alien race may have the very best thoughts for the human race and for planet Earth, there'd be a group in our community which would be hostile to that thought. So what you've got to allow for here is if an alien presence was going to be declared on planet Earth, there'd be a lot of people trying to eradicate them before they got established. And my main thought right at the moment is they've already landed in China. They're setting up a community in China, and that virus, which was released right in an area they may well have been inhabiting, was designed to eliminate them, not us.
Okay, so you're positing that aliens dropped the virus in China to get rid of them?
No, that the military in China released the virus to get rid of the alien, you could say, infiltration of their people.
Okay, so I want to get that clear because I've never heard this. The military created a virus to get rid of the aliens within the Chinese population.
Exactly.
And
I hark right back to the very first few words I said. When I was uplifted and brought into the alien community, the very first thing that they were worried about is I was carrying viruses that they could not resist. I mean, we built up a huge immunity on this planet. I mean, you might remember the War of the Worlds.
Right.
The Martians that came in these machines were beaten by the common cold at the end.
Yeah.
It killed them all off. They survived for a few weeks or months, and then the common cold killed the colony that were here driving those monstrous machines.
That's right,
so
Alec.
You've got to consider that the Earth environment is hostile to most aliens.
See,
there's so many germs and bugs here.
We humans earned the right to be here.
Exactly so.
Right.
So this is why when they first uplifted me in the first place, not only were they checking me for viruses that might be harmful to them, they were trying to incorporate my immunity because I'm a reasonably healthy guy. I've never had a sick day in my life. I don't have a doctor. I'm 72 years old and I've never been, to a doctor for any ailment whatsoever. So I have a good immunity to most viruses on this planet, obviously. I never catch colds. I never get the flu. I might have had one cold in my life or two. So I'm unusual in that manner, which would be one of the main reasons why they'd be thinking to uplift me. But therefore, they want to transfer my immunity into their cultural system so that when they do come here, they are more immune to everything that you're just saying that we've built up a huge resistance to. So that's why I'm swapping the friend and foe around here, and I'm saying that there's more likely to be a military complex on this planet that knows the aliens are starting to infiltrate and are going to be hostile to a military establishment on Earth running the show. And they have been. The military-industrial complex has been running planet Earth at least since the Second World War, and probably since the First World War. And they know that's detrimental to the human race. I mean, we're very close to being cyborgs now, and the military complex goes 3 steps further with G5 or 5G and a few other little things tweaked in our heads. We'll be walking cyborgs before long, and that's what the establishment want. They want a community which is compliant.
Okay,
and
Alec, I gotta. One of our servers went down for just a second. Let me step out of the picture, and you're going to be on the picture for just a second. I'll be right back. Okay, that was quick. So I'm back. All right. So listen, you're talking about some.
We mentioned 5G and the military complex and Wi-Fi, and all of a sudden, and a different concept of what's going on, and all of a sudden your server goes out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
See, there you go. All right, we've got another question for you. It says, Alec, what about 2D entities that you may have seen since last March?
Yeah, I haven't actually seen them personally, but I've been talking about that. We've got a new edition, a more final edition to the book I published 20 years ago called Coevolution. And we're finally, I mean, there were some people I was trying to protect that helped me during the course of the last 20 years. I didn't want their names mentioned, but they were crucial to the big story in my book. And they've since passed on. So, they're out of this Earth environment now. So I can declare who they were, what they were doing. And so the final part of my story, which has been 30 years in the telling, can now be told in its entirety. And part of that was that the alien community that I was interacting with had hacked into other realities themselves to just explore the universe. Mm-hmm. And they found out that one of the realities, we call it 4th dimension, 5th dimension, 6th dimension, 10th dimension, they'd hacked into a 2D reality, a two-dimensional reality, which was what you would really call a flatline, a community without breadth and depth. So, and what would be capable of being a lineal, like a computer program reality, where there's only sort of an electrical current running, and the current is the reality of everything. And the thing is that what's going to happen when 5G comes along is that we're going to open ourselves up to these other sort of communities that live in a 2D world. And if we get the Borg community wired into our brains, as a lot of people would like us to be enhanced with, to create smarter humans, they think. Mm-hmm. We're going to be basically leaving ourselves vulnerable to being hacked by a very intelligent artificial community of, I could call them aliens. Mm-hmm. That's the danger.
Okay, let's get to a couple more questions real quick. Have you been contacted by James Casbolt or Lieutenant Colonel SC or Hannah Billups?
No, none of those guys
are
interested in me.
All right, let's move on to another question. Do you feel like your body was being vibrated apart cell by cell, that you found yourself without a body?
Well, that's the feeling in the car that my body had. It felt like the whole car was shaking, actually. It felt like even the road was shaking. It was like driving in an earthquake. Whether that was because the whole concept of my body was being linearly deconstructed so that the car could pass through this what would have been a concrete or a brick wall or a rock interface, or transposed into their reality. That's what was happening, obviously, but mm-hmm. that's only hearsay and not, I can't give a factual report on.
All right. Was there a foul smell associated with your abductors or buzzing sounds during your encounter?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know whether I had smell initially, of course, out of body, but because I could touch and feel, I guess I should have had smell as well. But at no stage in the whole 10 days I was away was there any smells that were unpleasant.
Okay. And from Anita, how would you know what a humanoid would look like?
A humanoid, when I say humanoid, that means that they had a body, a torso, a head, 2 arms and 2 legs, like a human being, but they might be of a different construct, like smaller, shorter, wider, fatter, but still call it humanoid simply because it has a head and a body and legs.
Okay. All right. Now you say that were you actually on board the same ship for 10 days or different ships?
No, actually the ship was only a transport device. They didn't even call it a ship. They called it a transporter. It was really a beam machine, I guess, where they went from one reality to another. At least that's the way it was described to me, from one existence to another existence. It might have been a physical machine orbiting in our solar system, but it was beaming me and them to a different reality. And the reality I ended up on for the 10 days was another planet. but wasn't a planet like Earth. It was once again an artificial construct. They had made it themselves, and that's when we get into this conscious reality. Do we construct the reality that we move in every day? And because if that is the case, we've constructed this planet and the universe we see, just as they were describing to me, with the help of a little bit of technology, they constructed their own mini solar system.
So you were on the same ship?
Well, the ship, what we could call transporting me to their planet. So I was on a planet.
Okay, how long were you on the ship, and how long were you on the planet?
I was on the planet. Well, the whole entire time away was 9.9 days. I call it.
Okay, so
days,
the transport time.
So
the transport time was very small.
Frame of 24 hours, acclimatizing within their ship, transport to their home world for say 8 days, another 24 hours transporting back to planet Earth, because it was a round trip.
Do you feel like you were traveling light speed, or did they bend time and space?
Didn't feel there was any movement at all. No sensation of movement.
Okay. So you were on the planet for 9 days. So this is a relevant question, especially what's going on here in America. Anytime during that time, did you need toilet paper?
No, that's another thing. That blue body I was describing, and once again, please allow for the fact that they'd constructed a body which wasn't exactly. It wasn't built the same way my Earth body was built. It was built to be, to operate in their environment. But the thing is that with the blue bodysuit that I had, they were more plant-like actually in their initial construct. They breathed through their skin, and they expelled, if you like, they cleansed their body. I mean, when we go to the toilet, when we pee in that, all we're doing is flushing our blood. What our blood supply has our waste. Well, actually, it's only excess water. When you go to the toilet for pee, for instance, you're only excreting excess water from your blood supply. So when I'm saying they excrete waste product from their body, it doesn't need to be anything more than water. So what the suit was doing was allowing their bodies to breathe and allowing their bodies to excrete any waste products. And it was artificially cleansing it at the same time. So they didn't have to wash, bathe, or go to the toilet, because all that was taken care of by the suit, which was also a sort of a biosuit. It was an anti-radiation suit. And it was also a protection from, obviously, sunlight, which I'm talking about, solar radiation. Travel through dimensional realities is heavily factored into the radiation factor, not in the non-physical sense. That does not out of body.
Okay, that doesn't sound like good alien hygiene right there. Hey, in some science fiction movies I saw, they show the mothership going over the oceans and actually sucking the water off the planet. I'm wondering if these aliens are really stealing our toilet paper. I mean, it's disappearing from our shelves here in America. Let's get to another question for you. From Azure says, are there any other reports of similar circumstances that you've come across? Has somebody else told you the same thing happened to them?
I haven't actually had, I've had a lot of people try and relate their experiences to mine, but there's a lot of stuff, not a lot, but there are a few little details I've left out simply because I've been waiting for someone to convey to me these missing details, and then I'd know that they didn't get the idea from me that had an experience similar.
Right, I understand.
I have to say, basically, no. I haven't had an exact story told to me by anyone else that's had this exact scenario.
Have you, during all this time, did you have any deep spiritual revelations of any kind?
I have had since. I've had 30 years of research, as I said at the beginning. I mean, I didn't know anything about UFOs or aliens before 1989 that I hadn't read in a magazine or, a cheap TV program or something like that. So I had no real research, and I've done my research after the fact. But I wrote the story and my adventure up first. And I've kept myself deliberately away from other people's experiences. I didn't want to contaminate my original event with theirs. I didn't want to transpose their belief system into mine.
Right.
So I'm not really overly read up on every other person's detailed alien abduction.
Well, in your research, what have you concluded?
Well, as I was sort of suggesting earlier on, that our conscious reality is the only one that seems to really count. These aliens put great recourse into conscious constructs of their own realities and artificial realities, and I think they were of the understanding that our Earth and our universe is only really some sort of a matrix construct. So, some of those sci-fi movies we've seen are more real than we could even imagine. But I mean, I don't understand how it works. But I can understand how our consciousness can be creating a reality for us to perceive. And the whole of the Earth experience is only something to experience what we can perceive as a physicality, a face-to-face, a handshaking reality, which we cannot have in the spiritual realm.
Well, how do you know they didn't implant memories into your brain?
Of course, I don't know that. I mean, my whole memory could be artificial on their side of things. I know I relied heavily on their reconstituting what was a memory blank when I came down here. It seems to be something to do with Earth and balance or magnetic realities or some construct on the planet that doesn't really seem to allow you to come back off planet onto on planet from a spiritual event with 100% recall, especially when you're talking about a physicality, because my physical body was removed. I didn't just go in a spiritual form. I went in a physical form. And when they put me back, it was in a physical form. And when you do that, your conscious memory of such seems to be wiped by some sort of a contract we have down here. So it was up to them to reconstitute by lucid dreams over a long course of time. The whole story I'm relating to you now was through lucid dreams, reconstituting what had happened during those 10 days. Of course, it could be their mindset influencing my reality, and I have no defense for that. I don't try and conceal it. It could be that, but whatever it is, it's not my reality. It's somebody else's. So I'm just relaying what I saw and what they allowed me to relate to.
So somebody says it sounds like he really got jacked by these aliens here. Do you think aliens in and of themselves have a higher spiritual awareness or being, or do you think they don't have a spirit at all? They're more of a organic type species.
I don't think there's anything with a conscious reality in this universe that doesn't have a spiritual base, and I'm talking rocks and plants and every pet animal that all your listeners have got. They're as conscious and as real and as spiritual as all the rest of us. So to conceive that there's aliens out there, the only alien that might not have a spiritual base would be an artificial construct, AI, which somebody seems to be trying to introduce into our reality right now. That's the one I'd be seriously worried about. AI does not have a spiritual consciousness. If you get it attached to you, you've got demons.
And right. Well, there you go. What now?
Demons. Because that's what they are. AI is a demonic reality. That's what 2D demons, it was explained to me. That's the people that are possessed by demons on planet Earth and have somebody else pulling their strings, which making them do crazy things, kill other people or kill themselves. That's an artificial construct that's gotten hold of them. They have no respect for humanity and no respect for any spiritual belief. And that makes sense when you consider what demonic possessions are all about. Wow.
So you believe in that there is demonic possession. Would that account for the evil on the earth?
Most likely. I mean, and normal human beings, the 90% guys that you and I would meet in the street, they don't want to blow people up. They don't want to have wars. I mean, but there seems to be a small proportion that are very happy to have a war every day somewhere.
Yeah, you got that right.
Either these are people possessed or they're not human in the first place.
Well, Alec, we are entering into the world of AI, and it's going to eventually control everything, sort of like Skynet on Terminator. It is a soulless type of thing, but now you've introduced uh, demons into that, which sort of sounds appropriate, but AI would make decisions not based on any sort of conscious. And so if humans get in the way, they've got to be eliminated. There's not even a wisp of guilt on that. So, but AI is coming and it's already here. It's in probably in our phones already and in our computers. So are we surrounded by demons?
Yeah, that's a $64,000 question, isn't it? I mean, I don't know everything. I mean, what I'm relating to you here is a lot of stuff that comes from a different side of the mirror. I'm turning a lot of stuff around because you do not want to believe everything you hear and see. And if it's coming at you from 50,000 different directions, I'd be 50,000 different doubts about whether it's real or not. I've been holding back from telling the story because I know the drama I've had trying to get it out to the mainstream. I've got a researcher in the UK called David Griffin. He has had nothing but AI demons in his reality. He's had computers. I don't mean in a physical concept of taking him over. He's had so many computers blow up in his reality in the last 5 years, 10 years he's been working with me that you couldn't believe it. And he's been running alongside me, deep researching this case. And he's the only guy, apart from Duncan Rhodes at Nexus Magazine, which has been on my case since day one, which is, Duncan Rhodes published my book in 1997. So we're talking 23 years to that day. And he's been on my case. He's still on my case. And he's an avid researcher and a publisher of Alternate Reality magazine. Believe me, if there was a shadow of doubt that what I was saying wasn't real, do you think he'd still be hanging around after 23 years? And David Griffin's been 10 years into it now, having all sorts of grief and strife, and he won't let go of this because he knows he's onto something that's real. And I'm just conveying what I was told. Beware of AI. It's going to come and bite us on the ass, and we're going to be very sorry when we embrace it. That's all I can say.
Wow.
So keep your spiritual self isolated from AI, or if you want to have any semblance of humanity left. And I know it's coming. And the thing is, what I always say to people, look at the advances we've made in computer technology in the last 20 years, and then have a look at your car you're driving, and have a look at a jumbo jet, and tell me they're any different in the last 20 years. Have we moved 1 inch in any other technology except computers? And why is that?
Well, we haven't moved anywhere toward getting a world that isn't at war. We haven't made any movement on that. Kevin Utterberger wants to know, when you were up on the planet, did they perform any medical procedures like sperm removal or probe insertions in orifices?
No, but they did, as I explained before, they tested me very thoroughly for viruses.
Just sort of a virus.
They're looking for Earth germs. And if I had any, at least they wanted to make sure that I had the immunity to control them. So if they were going to have to defend themselves from a virus, they wanted to know that at least I was carrying an immunity to it so that they could inoculate, if you like, their community and prepare it for Earth occupation. But I put that in a friendly context.
All right. Raul says, do we live in a video game matrix created by AI?
Yeah, well, I don't. This is a really difficult subject. It's the most difficult question to answer. Congratulations on asking it, because I'll say I don't believe in a God as a physical human entity, like, the guy that sits on the throne with a long beard and making decisions on every single one of us. I most definitely don't believe in that sort of a God. But if there was a construct that created a reality that we believe to be Earth and the moon and the sun and the whole of the rest of the universe we haven't fully explored yet, if I was to say, do you believe that was constructed, I would say yes. But I think that we're part of this whole thing. Each individual conscious being, each rock on the planet, each tree, is part of a conscious decision to create this illusion, if you like, of a reality for reasons that I could not explain apart from what I said before, to have a physical experience or
Mm-hmm.
a simulated physical experience.
Mm-hmm.
So do I, I can't answer, do I believe in God or do I believe we live in an artificial AI constructed matrix? Because that would kind of defeat the purpose. If we are AI in the first place, then when G5 comes along, we're only going to go home, aren't we? We're going to go back to source.
Wow.
And if we are just an artificial construct of AI
Mm-hmm.
and we have no souls and no realities, then there's a lot of shit going on this planet that I can't explain. And a lot of people's experiences that I can't explain. So
Mm-hmm.
if that was the case, I bow out of this argument. I no longer have any answers to any of it.
Mm. Okay. When you were on the planet, did they offer you anything to eat or drink?
Most certainly, yes. Now that's where we get back into a very interesting reality phase, that they drank a solution which might in some way be organic, or, with nourishment from, because they had some plants that they certainly hybridized to give them some sort of form of nourishment. But the main construct was what we would call white powder of gold. It's an orm type, orbitally rearranged monatomic physical. So, I could call it a powder, but of course it's crystallized gold, which becomes a powder when it's crystallized. It's no longer a metal, and that can be absorbed when it's turned into a liquid or absorbed into a liquid. You can drink it, you can absorb it into your bloodstream. But the interesting thing was that blue biosuit I described earlier on was also partly constructed of this monotomically, made gold product.
Wow.
So was their spaceship.
Mm.
And I've heard reports, and I've done a lot of research on monatomic gold, of course, and the guy Hudson that in around about 1997 also described that he was extracting it from Arizona or something.
Okay.
He had some property, and yeah. So
well, okay, Alec. Well, listen.
Hudson monatomic gold to understand this product, but it does interact on quite possibly on a spiritual level with the human body.
Yeah.
So we're talking here about a physical entity which has spiritual aspects and multidimensional as well, because evidently monatomic gold can be made when it's heated to disappear into realities that we can't see, and then made to reappear when it's cooled back down.
Okay. Well,
and that's a proven scientific fact. I can't, you can't deny that as such. Yeah. And these aliens were using it as a food source and as a construct for certain technologies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see gold when I take a leak, but did they offer you any meat, any steak or anything like that? Lobster?
No, they didn't. They didn't need any form of meat. I know that's a physical objection, obviously, to eating animal life, but they didn't find it necessary, put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Are you a vegetarian?
Beg your pardon?
Are you a vegetarian?
Not myself. No, never have been. So I'm not coming from that mindset. But that was all that was offered me in the 10 days that I was away.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Was there any entertainment there on the planet?
Yes, there was. And apart from the interactions, they have social events. They communicate. They have gatherings, obviously, but they also play what we would call, I suppose, a realistic video game. So, they construct their own realities in your head. When you're playing these video games, they happen in your head. Even though you may be looking at a viewing screen, you put your hands on the device and it runs through you. So you're having this physical event taking place in your mind. So you're living it as a reality, and you can play any game you like.
Is that like the holodeck on Star Trek?
Well, I'm never been, believe it or not, a sci-fi fan. Sure, I've seen Avatar and things since because I just want to see who's pinching all my own stuff, Because if you think deeply about Avatar, he was extracted from a human body and put into an alien body.
Right.
And guess what? It was blue, and then he went and lived with them.
And they got it from you.
Yeah, my story came out in 1997, long time before Avatar was ever thought of.
You got a copyright claim right there, Alec.
Yeah, and I think about James Cameron and how much of my event has he stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that mindset is that they play games. They play video games, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're coming from. We're going back there now.
Well, I play games too. I play Cowboys and Indians with an AR-15, and they're the Indians. All right, here's another question for you. Did you notice any high-tech or elaborate machines or computers on board? Something that's fantastic, never even heard of.
Yeah, well, I mean, they when I arrived on their planet, they were into nostalgia, I think. They didn't have any vehicles that we would call cars, any transportation devices at that point. But they had museums like we do. They had old technology. And what they did with me, because they obviously knew I was into cars, on Earth at least, and they brought out something that was like many thousands of years old. And it was a form of a vehicle where you sat in it. It didn't have wheels on it. And it was sort of like a little hovercraft, but it worked on a magnetic repulsion, something or other, and it was driven by physical mind impulse. But they brought that out for me to drive around and or be driven around in as a nostalgia event. You know, like,
wow.
They're like, look, we've got this Earth guy back here with us, and look, we're driving him around this antique car. So, but most of their technology was biological.
Okay.
They grew their houses. I mean, I watched some concert on an electromagnetic sort of a structure. They grew these buildings, and the buildings were capable of you being able to interact with it on a mental level. In other words, at a higher, what you might call, quite sure the right terminology, but speaking without words, I can't think of the right word now, I should know, telepathy. You could actually make these buildings brighten the room up, cool the room down, open a window, like the whole wall would become transparent if you wanted to look out of it. And it was all done with you had a rapport with the building you're in. It treated you as a guest, and you treated it as a friend. That was, and all their technology, including their spaceships, were similar. So in other words, there was a mindset going on here where you interacted with their technology at a biological level, which is why a lot of Earth, you know, if we ever captured a spaceship from this particular race, we have great difficulty in ever driving it or even back engineering it because it's working on a biological level.
Wow. Okay, let's get another question. And I don't know what this stands for. It says, have you ever taken DMT? That sounds like some kind of drug.
Yeah, I think that comes from like ayahuasca or so.
Okay.
You know,
have you ever taken any of that?
Especially, yeah. No, I've never taken. Believe it or not, I'm probably you talk about a straight guy. You know, I've never even taken marijuana in my whole entire life. Never smoked a joint. Never taken heroin or any of the, you know, the speedy drugs. Never done ayahuasca, although I'm tempted to. I've been on the Amazon. I've been with shamans.
Wow.
On the Amazon in Peru, and I never got quite round to that because I never had the time. But if I ever went back that way, I think I'd probably go on an ayahuasca trip because it sounds like it's very, very similar. You can go on an adventure if ayahuasca treats you well to experience something very similar to what I experienced myself, including beings that drive in spaceships, evidently.
Okay, so you were on this planet having some R&R with the aliens, having a good time. Sounds like drinking gold, and I mean, that sounds like pretty cool stuff. But you had to come back. How was the return flight?
The return was just an exact mirror image of the original flight out, where they basically decommissioned that old body, and even though I wasn't physically aware of it happening, they transformed my consciousness, obviously, back into my Earth body and plonked me back into that car and somehow seamlessly dovetailed me into that drive home, even though there was a 10-day gap I arrived in Auckland 10 days after I had originally departed in that car. But I wasn't aware of it at the time. And because I was leaving one situation behind and arriving to a new situation in a different city, they weren't aware of there being a time gap. I mean, I was just visiting some friends in Auckland, staying with them for a few days, and I didn't tell them particularly when I was coming. I just said, "Look, I'm coming up to Auckland in a few days. Can you put me up? Can I stay with you guys?" Yeah, sure. When you arrive, good-o. And I arrived there, and they didn't realize that it was 10 days earlier that I'd left. I didn't know it was 10 days earlier that I'd left. So that missing time was a shock to me when I discovered it in real life. But no, so they just transported me, put the car back together, deconstructed it obviously on the ship, I guess. I don't know where they put the car otherwise, and put me back together and in it. But the problem was that they didn't do such a marvelous job. That car had all sorts of mechanical problems after that event. And that's what put me on the track that something unusual was happening here. That car literally fell apart in many aspects after that 10 days.
So they just couldn't put the car back together right.
They weren't. I don't see what they told me when they originally lifted me off the planet is that you won't want to be going back there because we know what's coming and you won't want to be part of it. Not only that, when we put you back, you will never be able to tell the story to everyone because no one will believe you. And also the authorities will be gunning for you from day one because you've had the experience that they don't want anyone else to have. And that's knowing the future, basically.
So you were gone for 10 Earth days. And nobody during that time were people looking for you?
No, that's you have to understand these things are so perfectly constructed. If we have a destiny, if our life is preordained and it's marked out, that was, to my memory, the only time in my entire life I could have had 10 days missing and not one person could care less where I was or knew where I was or was looking for me or was waiting for an appointment. And that's the way it was. At that one time in my life, I had complete freedom of movement and I was basically not being watched.
So the aliens knew exactly when to take you.
It appeared that way.
Yeah,
it would have appeared that way.
They were waiting for their perfect opportunity.
Could be, or that the opportunity was created by them.
And they never came back to get you again?
No. Not that I've remembered, put it that way. If this time they've come back, they've seeded no memory, so I wouldn't know for sure.
Have you been checked for implants?
No, I never have. No, I've stayed away from, believe it or not, I've actually stayed away from a lot of the UFO community and people working in it. Once again, because I didn't want to contaminate. Sure, I did a bit of research with some sister UFO communities early on because I wanted to understand my experience. But I soon knew that I was running on a different tangent. I found I was meeting with people that were really angry about their experiences. And they were blaming, I don't know, the community or the military establishment or something. And I had what I was calling was a very gentle experience. And I didn't regret one day of it. And I didn't fit in with the people that were within the UFO groups that I was talking to.
Right.
Or at least not the majority of them.
Did the aliens tell you what planet you were on?
No. I called it, this is a literal translation between their language and ours, which is almost impossible. But they called it, their planet, their safe haven. Their place of it was their residence, but it was a safe construct they had made themselves.
Safe from who?
Haven.
Who were they trying?
My artificial name was Haven. I called it Haven, but that's only my interpretation of their name.
Okay, so who were they trying to create a safe space from? Was somebody after these aliens?
Yeah, well, because they'd artificially transported themselves out of our reality, they had no base of operation. I mean, if you're a spiritual dimension jumper, and somebody takes your body away from you, say you're residing in your body personally,
okay,
and your consciousness decides to go on a little mind trip, and in the meantime, somebody takes your body and destroys it.
Mm-hmm.
That way. And then your consciousness comes back onto planet Earth, and there's nowhere to hang out because your body's gone. It's been destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So now you've got a conscious entity with no domain, no planet, no home. They did the same thing with their reality. They created an artificial construct, created themselves into a higher dimensional realm that didn't have the physicality that we have in our world. They had to construct another realm in a higher dimension so that they could reside in it as a safe haven. And that was the whole idea of that construct, that universe. They created a sun, a moon, a planet, which they called their Earth, their safe haven. Mm-hmm. And that was where they resided. That's where their spiritual self remains, as a safe haven. So that's easy. I mean, it's difficult for me to put this in layman's terms in an Earth language which wasn't being used at the time. Just to give you a glimpse of their language, it was a vibrational color frequency. There were no words as such. Each color in the spectrum, as you might know, has a vibrational frequency, just as sound does, right from ultraviolet to infrared. And their sound was produced by the enhancement of that color hue. So as you see in our language, if someone's speaking, they pronounce a word, or you see it written down in a typeset, that what I was seeing in my head was a flash of color, and that was a typeset of language. But the color had a frequency to it, which was a song-like substance. They were singing to me in color, and that was their language. So their language was a song. So just like we have songs on planet Earth, and the songs have meanings, they would speak, but when they were speaking of everyday facts, it came out as a song.
There weren't,
even though it was loaded with information.
There weren't.
Don't forget, this is in your head, so you're getting images flashing with the color.
They weren't male aliens singing to you, were they?
Both, male and female, and even the older race. They
go both ways.
Much stronger, more telepathic.
Yeah.
They could convey details much stronger. They had an aura of presence, like you could knock a wall down with it.
Yeah.
When they came in the room, you could feel it. Their presence was dominating.
Yeah, sounds like they go both ways there, Alec. Here's a question. This is from Overbuilt Automotive. Were there any, and I just got asked a question from this writing. It says, was there any hot alien girls there?
They were all hot.
Okay. Well, how do we know they were hot? I mean, what's a hot alien? What's a hot alien look like?
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, I cannot speak for every man on the planet. The women were very beautiful. They were Asian, as I said, had an Asian bent to them. Mm-hmm. They were very beautiful women, and the guys were reasonably handsome, I guess, if you're into that.
No, I'm not into that.
No, you know what I mean.
I am not into that. No.
Don't forget, these are hybrids. They were constructed to be appealing to the human eye. They're going to come here and set up an residence, and they wouldn't want to be ugly. I mean, you know what? The prejudices on this planet to anyone being the wrong skin color or the wrong look, or if you got one eye in the middle of your head, you're out of here. If you've got a lopsided face, you talk funny, you're out of here. The human race is very biased.
You're messed up.
These guys are pretty smart. They're onto that, so they're not going to come down to Earth with a whole lot of ugly-looking people. They're going to be ostracized before they even start.
We've got enough of them in the Democrat Party.
They created some very beautiful-looking people. They would be very welcome in Earth society. I can assure you, a lot of men would find it very difficult to resist these women, and that's human men. So if you want to breed with an alien and you didn't know it, that's what's going on.
Wow.
Anyway, if you need to know that, I'm not into. I didn't want to get into that as a topic.
No.
But if your listeners want to ask, That's the way it is.
Okay. Well, hey, this is the way it is. It's all part of the universe we got out there. Crazy universe that it is. Alec Newald, we're getting near the end of the broadcast. I've flashed your book up several times in our background. How can they get it or you know more about you?
Well, the third edition yet we haven't yet published, so your listeners won't have missed anything. But Nexus Magazine and Duncan Rhodes, we're publishing the third edition, which is going to be far more expensive than we've had in anything in the past, because I said with the death of a couple of my friends, unfortunately, I can now tell a wider, a complete story, and we can go into a lot more details. What's in the previous books is probably about half the story. So now we can really expand it. So the third edition will come through Nexus Magazine out of Australia, and they need to just Google Nexus Magazine Australia website. They'll find it, and we're not published yet, but Duncan Rhodes, the editor and owner at Nexus, says when that book's ready to go, it'll be an electronic format, most likely to start with. It'll be on the web page. Viewers and listeners should look for it. And it will be in the next couple of months, for sure.
So what do you present in the book?
Basically, what I've told you, but in 10,000 times more detail. And what we haven't touched on here is what the authorities on planet Earth did to me once they found out where I'd been. As they came knocking, and they wouldn't take no for an answer. And when I didn't cooperate, they really screwed with my life. And in the end, they put me in prison so that they could cross-examine me. And I met some pretty weird people in prison, I can assure you, and saw some technology being used on me or demonstrated for me to get me on side that would blow your mind.
Well, listen, we can go longer if you want to talk about it.
Don't want to go too much into that, but what you're talking about, does this alien look like a Nordic? Everyone knows what a Nordic looks like, probably. Usually quite tall, well built. Usually, and if it's a male, he's strong, built like Tarzan, blue eyes, blonde hair. The woman would look the same. I was cross-examined by a guy that fits that bill when I was in prison, for sure. He was so big, I called him House. He walked in the room, he ducked under the door jamb. So he was in New Zealand, the door jamb, 6'6". He had to bend down to get in, so he's 6'9", getting up towards 7 foot tall, built like, brick shithouse, built strong.
Wow.
But he had translucent blue eyes. He almost looked albino.
Oh.
So he was very unusual. Couldn't say he wasn't human, because he had all the attributes of a human, but, say pale skin, almost silver hair, very translucent blue eyes, and really built strong. He could have lifted me up and broken me in half if he'd wanted to. And the first thing he did when he stepped in that door, ducked under there, was he was trying to read my mind.
Hate that.
Because I could feel the prick in the back of me. Because when you've been with aliens for 10 days and the whole thing was telepathic, I knew when someone was reading me. First thing he tried to do was get in my head. But fortunately, being with aliens for 10 days, it taught me ways to block that.
Wow.
But then he spent the next, he interviewed me for actually 2 days, but it went on for hours and hours at a time over a 2-day session. And he tried every trick in the book to get me on side. They even offered me some money to join their group. They've got some, I call companies out there, which use, I guess, alien technology to fund themselves. They have alien recovery programs, and he was working for one of these groups, and he said, you come work with us, share your information, everything you know we own, everything you own we own, and you're ours for the rest. But he said, you'll never want for $1 again in your life. You'll never have to work again in your life. And when you're in prison at that stage with a very doubtful future, and no money in the bank, and guys trying to screw you left, right, and center, and kill you, quite possibly.
What?
You are very tempted to get out of there any ticket you can.
Oh, man.
Okay, so, and the technology he showed me was like, well, using the star deck, holodeck. Yeah.
Wow. So
we're gone off screen, by the way.
Oh, I'm back. I'm sorry. Were there aliens in prison?
Not that I saw, but only the ones that came to visit me and interview me and question me and what So there was a third party in one of them as well that I couldn't even see. He was just a dark shadow.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they look like, but they were there, and of course house you couldn't miss. But I mean that I mean, if there needed to be a reality check, that was it. I knew that none of this was a dream, and none of this was people putting thoughts in my head. These were real. I was in jail. I was being interviewed, if you like. That's a polite way to put it, and they were ready to use any trick in the book to get me to spill the beans.
But you wouldn't do it.
No. And I think I actually, we had a mind game. I guess you could call it. House and I had a mind game going. And in the end, I think, because I resisted a lot of temptations, he had a respect for me that I think might have saved my life. And he actually came on board to a certain degree. I know he was still trying to get information out of me any way he could, but he started to share stuff with me that was mind-boggling for me, and even allowing for where I'd been and what I'd seen. I didn't know any of this was on planet Earth, and I knew that the military had technology which we can only dream about, and this guy had access to it, and he was using it in front of me. So
wow.
That's what's not in the book up till now.
Wow, you've been holding out in the last hour and a half.
Well, I mean, I was just answering the questions as you got to them.
So I mean, hang on for a second. I mean, what you said was that they were trying to get you to drop the soap in prison. You wouldn't do it. I don't know what was that. I can't get. Hang on. I'm coming back.
You'll survive. Yeah, of course I didn't want to go to prison. That's just the way it was. I mean, they made sure that I couldn't, that they made sure I went to prison, put it that way, even though I resisted it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just the way it is.
That can happen. Wow. I just say stay out of prison, man. All right, so anyway, to get more details on that, you got a 3rd edition book coming out.
That's right. Yep. And as I say, just keep an eye on Nexus Magazine and Duncan Rhodes, and we'll have something up on their website to inform people that the book's now available. So there you go. And it's been 30 years in the telling, 30 years in the making. So it's not something that just happened yesterday. So even when I went to prison, that was 1994, 93 through to 94. So that's a long, long time ago. Yep.
Stop. I gotta get off here, man. You crack me up. Just quit saying prison, because that's gonna end it for me. All right, hey, but speaking of ending, we gotta go. And man, good luck with your work. And
thank you, Daniel. Well, it's been an honor to talk with you.
Man, it's been really good. And really, you brought a story that we've never heard before. Yeah,
well, that's why I guess a lot of people didn't want you to hear it, and it's been difficult to get the story out. It really has. I mean, I've been blocked coming to America since I was invited to a conference in 95 or 94, and I couldn't get a visa into the States for love nor money. Now they've stopped me from going to Australia to even talk with my editor. I can't. I'm basically landlocked in New Zealand.
Wow.
When it comes to anything to do with the story,
well, they can't.
I'm in lockdown. I tried to get to a conference in 2016, and they turned me around at the border, turned me around at the airport, and sent me home. That's how serious it is. That's when we started talking about AI. That's when I knew I was touching a nerve. So that's when this all got very messy.
Well,
that's where the new book has to go.
Yeah. Well, they can't stop you getting on the internet like this.
Well, you'd be surprised when people do try and, like, Duncan's been having a bit of problem too, and now he's starting to work on this third edition. His life has not been sweet either. I sometimes wonder just how badly that is. We did a documentary on my case back in 2011 when I managed to get into Australia, and we had a young woman there filming it. I had an interview with another guy there doing the documentary with me. She filmed it with 2 cameras. When she left the venue, she got bowled over in a car crash. She went to hospital.
Wow.
She nearly got her neck broken, evidently. And when we got the tapes back, both cameras were blank.
Wow.
And also, you want to go one more step down the conspiracy theory, even though my editor, Duncan Rhodes, when he first put an excerpt out of my book into Nexus magazine, this is way back in 97, that time the editorial stuff was on a courier that got intercepted and stolen.
Wow.
And it's the first and only time it's ever happened to him, according to him, that the courier van got intercepted and only the text was stolen. None of the advertising, none of the pictures, just the text, which included an excerpt from my first book. So if you can call that coincidence, I guess. But somebody wanted to know what I was going to say. And they didn't, obviously, because I didn't mention the last half of it, the AI, the prison, house, and all that stuff, they let that go. And they let the second edition go too. But the third edition was always going to be about AI, about, what's going to happen next. And so far, we haven't been able to get this. We've been working on this edition for 4 years. Something always seems to come up to block it, including my trip to Australia, which was just cut short by the authorities. So somebody knows what's going on, and they don't like me. That's all I can say.
Well, I say keep pissing them off, man.
Yeah. Well, you mean I can't make this up, Daniel. I can't make that up.
I don't think so.
Anyway, that's the story to now.
Sounds legit to me. So anyway, then go to your website, and then you'll announce when you have that third edition out.
I sure will. Yep, we will. I'll contact you personally and let you know, and then you can inform your listeners if they're interested.
All right, and it'll have all that prison stuff in there too, I bet.
It surely will. It'll have house to a T, every detail of it.
Okay. Well, how'd you like being on the show tonight?
I loved it. Thanks, Daniel. This is great. I've never been on a format so much where listener questions are driving the show, and that's great because it went where they wanted me to go. And I just hope that even though I probably didn't answer all the questions to their satisfaction, I just did the best I could, and that's all I can do. And
it was great, and there was a lot of kudos in the chat going on, saying a great show. Glad to have you on tonight, Alec Newald. Appreciate you being on the program. Can we have you on again sometime?
Yeah, sure, Daniel. Maybe when the book's out, and then we can really discuss it because we'll have something that you can hold in your hand and say, here it is.
Right on. Okay. Well, stay safe down there in Newfoundland. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Daniel. Been a pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.